Hello there, and welcome into the ShopFix channel, a community joined together for the love of woodworking. In this episode, we're going to be covering various topics associated with machine planing, including planer location, how to operate a planer, how to use common features of planers, how to plane with the grain, and finally, how to set up a board and get it ready for planing. Hope you enjoy. The love of woodworking. Planer location within the woodshop is extremely important because of what you're trying to get out of that location. Are you trying to save space in a one-car garage woodshop like me, or are you trying to make it really easy to plane large boards without having to bend down at all? So it's kind of a trade-off. Now we're down here on the side of my standalone work cart, and you can see it's where I house my benchtop joiner, and over here is my DeWalt planer. And I built this to save as much space as possible, especially because I'm working in a small shop. The jointer work area is right above the planer work area, and it saves a lot of space. I was thinking about maybe doing a flip cart, but this is even better because I don't have to change the position of the machines or move them around. So it's ready to go, everything's set up, and I can go right to the machine, open up the blast gate, and everything's ready and set up. And it doesn't take up much room. Right here you can see is where I house my planer sled, and I got a piece of cherry that I just finished up on it. And it's kind of nice that I had this area down here because it's not in the way of the planer, and I can just house that right there for whenever I need it. And that's about it for this side of the work cart. Alright, so the first feature I want to show you on this thickness planer is the mechanism that raises and lowers the cutter head. And on a thickness planer, this is what you're going to be using all the time to adjust the cuts. Well, with the DeWalt model, not only is the mechanism easy to move, it has a display at the top that tells you exactly how far a turn will move the measurement. If you want anything over like an inch, you're gonna have to either measure it on the side of the board, the actual lumber that you're planing, or you're gonna have to rely on this measurement on the planer. And I can tell you with the DeWalt model, the DW734, you can rely on that measurement. I have planed things to specific thicknesses on this without even measuring the lumber. I only use this. Now obviously, if it's uncalibrated, you can easily calibrate it by unscrewing these little screws right here and moving this red mechanism up and down just a hair or a fraction so that you can get that locked in. Now, with me, right out of the box, it was already perfect, so I didn't even have to move that, but you can if you want. But I'd say that the mechanism that lowers and raises the cutter head, along with the accurate measurement that it's calibrated to, is one huge benefit to this planer. Alright, so let's move on to the next feature of this DeWalt planer, and it's one of the most important features in my mind. So first we covered how to lower the cutter head, and as you see, I've lowered the cutter head to little over 3/4. And I have a piece here, and I want to show you that this little area right here is the material removal gauge, and that's what I want to talk about next. The material removal gauge is so important to actually setting the height at which you want to plane at, because one of the things that can go wrong when you're planing lumber is that if you set the cutter head too low and you start taking off too much lumber, the planer is either A, going to just stop and you won't be able to plane, and then you have to turn off the machine and raise it up and pull it out, or worse, it could actually damage the blades or the rollers or the whole machine itself. So making sure that you're not planing too much lumber is super important. And with the material removal gauge, you can just slide it under there, and as you can see, I've set the planer to take off a 1/16 of an inch as indicated by this gauge. Now if I remove the lumber, it drops back down to 0. Now, if I wanted to take off a little bit less, all I have to do is raise it up a turn, and you can see now I'm almost taking off a 32nd. So you can adjust exactly how much lumber you want to take off by slightly adjusting while you have it under the material removal gauge. So that's also a huge benefit. Overall, I've noticed that this thing produces really, really nice, smooth finishing surfaces. Another important feature on this DeWalt planer is something called the turret stop, and it's on the side of the planer, and it can be adjusted by simply spinning a disc. And what that does is it actually sets the depth that the planer will go down to, so you can get the thickness perfect. So for instance, I can start this turret stop at 3/4, and then as I adjust it, I can go from a 1/2 inch down to a 1/4 of an inch down to 0. So if you need to plane lumber down to 3/4 and all your boards you want exactly 3/4, you can just set the turret stop down here to 3/4 and all the boards will be the same exact thickness. Same thing if you want to plane down to a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 of an inch. So it has those 4 adjustments from 3/4 to a 1/2 to a 1/4 to 0. So it kind of gives you a couple options there if you want your boards all the exact same thickness at those corresponding measurements. So that's another cool feature on this DeWalt planer. If you want to get a really smooth cut on your planer, maybe you're making a final pass on a really nice board and it's going to be the final piece. So you don't want any chip outs or rough spots, and you don't want to sand a lot. So you can go with the grain to get a nice smooth cut. And to do that, remember the cutter head's at the top. So you're going to want the grain lines going from left to right. And you can see right here pretty predominantly that one grain line that goes through the board that starts at the bottom over here and works its way all the way to the top over here. And since the cutter head is at the top, that would be cutting with the grain. If we flip this board over and had the grain go in the opposite direction, that would be going against the grain. So just remember, if you want to go with the grain on a planer, like a machine planer like mine, you can do so easily. Just remember the cutter head is at the top. This whole process begins with your rough sawn lumber, and you want to cross-cut it into workable pieces. I think it's good practice to cut around large knots in your wood so that you don't chip either your jointer or planer knives while you're milling. After cross-cutting, we'll pick one edge to joint, and you want to make sure that you pick the edge with no knots, cracks, or splits so you get a nice cut. To make sure that you get the flattest edge possible, you'll want to usually run it 2 to 3 times on either 1/32 or 1/16. I prefer 1/32 because it seems like it saves the jointer knives, makes them last a little bit longer, and gets a nice clean cut. When ripping these boards down to the proper width on the table saw, you'll want to make sure that the jointed edge that you just created is the one that you rest on the fence so that you get nice straight cuts. Also want to note here that the width of the board is going to depend on the width of your joiner because you're going to face joint next. Now you'll take these boards that have a smaller width than the capacity width of your jointer and face joint them at about 1/32 or 1/16. Throughout this process, you want to make sure that you retain as much thickness in the board as you can, and to accomplish this, just take thin passes until you get a flat board. Now, keeping in mind that we want to retain as much thickness, we'll plane the other side square and make sure that we only take enough passes as necessary to get all the boards the same thickness and flat on both sides. Well, thanks so much for watching.
I hope you have a great day, and until next time, have fun with your shop fix.